All right, Luke chapter 18, beginning in verse 1. Luke chapter 18, verse 1. And he told them a parable to the effect that they ought always to pray and not lose heart. He said, in a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor respected man. And there was a widow in that city who kept coming to him and saying, give me justice against my adversary. For a while he refused, but afterward he said to himself, though I neither fear God nor respect man, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will give her justice, so that she will not beat me down by her continual coming. And the Lord said, hear what the unrighteous judge says, and will not God give justice to his elect, who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long over them? I tell you, he will give justice to them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? Well, I'll be honest from the beginning. This is not one of my favorite parables. It's, I don't know. It always doesn't sit well with me. It's not really pleasant to read. It's not a happy story by any stretch of the imagination. Always an interesting one to preach. The other thing that's really tough about this is that typically when I come to a parable like this, the main focus of the sermon is to, through a variety of means, figure out what is Jesus' purpose for telling the parable. Now, if you pay attention, especially if you're a person who likes to take notes, you'll probably notice that often when I preach a parable, that's kind of the point of the sermon, is I get to the end and say, this is why Jesus did this. This is why he said it. This is what he wants you to do. Now, the issue with this parable is that Luke kind of steals my thunder and opens up with where I would usually end my sermon. He starts out with, and he told them a parable to the effect that they ought always to pray and not lose heart. So that option's cut off for me. You already figured that part out. Or at least you did now. So I look at this parable, and I think, what are we to learn from this? It's pretty clear that we're not really supposed to equate God with this kind of jerk of a judge. It's clear that Jesus isn't trying to, it's not a parable to illuminate who God is, but nevertheless, it's really easy to start looking God as this judge who just doesn't care. So as we read this, what are we supposed to look at? We know that the point is we're supposed to pray all the time, but does that just mean that, okay, well, according to this parable, I have to pray all the time, so I'm gonna get on my phone and I'm gonna set like 48 different alarms, and every 30 minutes an alarm's gonna go off, and I'm gonna remember to pray, and I'm gonna do that for at least a day and a half before I throw my phone in the river and then move on to something else. You see, I never really think that that's what Christianity is supposed to look like. And so if it's not just a command to over and over and over just force ourselves into, it's 8:45. All right, God, I need this, and I want this, and okay, I got a minute in. Let's go on with my life. You see, that doesn't look to me like the kind of intimacy and closeness that God expects from us. So if in this parable that is commanding us to be continually in prayer, it's not about legalism, it's not about forcing ourselves to do it, then what is it about? So we have this story. And there was a city, and in that city there was a judge. Now in my head I'm singing, and the green grass grows all around, all around. See, this is what happens when your office is in the same room as the K through 6 music class. So we have this city, and in the city I just can't stop doing it. There's a judge. And so this judge is apparently not the best guy in the world. He doesn't fear God. He's not religious in any means. Essentially, he just does not submit to any higher power. He views himself as the ultimate authority, which means he is not accountable morally to anyone else. He can do what he wants. He can rule however he wants. He can treat people how he wants. And he never worries about what someone above him God or anyone else is going to say. It also says that he doesn't respect man. So not only does he not believe that there is any kind of power above him who has given him his authority and holding him accountable, he also doesn't believe that he has any reason to care what other people think. He's not worried about getting reelected. He's not worried about people not liking him. He's not worried about people not thinking he's a good judge. Everything about the way he operates is just for himself. And so we have this judge. He is the last person you would want to come before if you were asking for help, if you were looking for compassion or anything like that. And then this woman comes to him and it says that she's a widow. Now, widows in this culture were just the bottom of the social class. Women in this day and age required a man to speak up for them. And so if a girl was born for the early part of her life, her father would look out for her. Her father would speak on her behalf. He would, if there was legal action to be taken, he would do that on her behalf. If her father died, her older brothers would do the same thing until eventually she was married and then her husband took over that role. And so her husband would step in and he would speak for her in public and he would speak on her behalf and he would take care of her. You see, the women didn't do the going to court in these days, let alone a woman who was a widow, a woman who was not able to support herself but was supported by those around her. And so for a widow to go before a judge was rare in any circumstance, let alone this man who wouldn't show compassion for the sake of compassion, who wouldn't treat people well just because he thought it was the right thing to do. So the first thing to realize is that this woman just blew out social norms and customs. She disregarded the way that she was supposed to act. What she did was out of character for her or for any other widow. And above all of that, she does this to this judge who must have been known for his harshness, for his selfishness. And so if there's one person that wasn't going to listen, that was going to throw her out, that was going to rebuke her, that was going to just put her out even more on the streets, it was this guy. And yet, she continues to come before him. So much so that eventually this guy gives in to her. And not because he's nice, not because he feels bad, but he literally just says, she is going to wear me out with her coming. And so she's coming before him so often that it's exhausting. Now, I don't know how often that is. I don't know if that's every day. I don't know if that's morning and evening or 3 times a day. I don't know if she sits outside his door and every time he's got a free minute and nobody comes in, she runs in there and asks him. We don't know. What we do know is that it was enough that this guy was getting sick of it. And not only annoyed, but just exhausted, worn out. He says, so that she will not beat me down by her continual coming. You know, it makes me wonder what this issue was that she was dealing with here. I've been to court a couple times. I believe all of mine were for traffic violations. I have a lot of speeding tickets, if we're being honest. But I gotta say, I've been to court for tickets that I've gotten. I might have been to court once for a traffic or a parking ticket, trying to get it reversed. But I tell you what, if I went to Burlington and I got a traffic ticket, and I went to court to contest it because I thought it was undeserved, if they said no, I would just pay the $20. I wouldn't come back over and over and over again. I certainly wouldn't go to court enough times that the judge would be worn out by my coming over a $20 traffic ticket. And I think that most of you would do the same. It wouldn't be worth my effort. I am not invested enough in overcoming a parking ticket to go to court day in and day out until the judge is just beaten down and worn out by how much I pester them. And so it really makes me wonder, what is it that she was trying to get? What is it that was so important that she was willing to continually, over and over and over, go to this judge time and time again? Now, all it tells us was that she was looking for justice against her adversary. So clearly there's a third party here. There's another character that had done something to harm this woman. And maybe they stole from her or cheated her. We don't know. But whatever it is, it was big enough and it was important enough that she would just focus her entire life on receiving justice from this judge. And so this is the story we have. Now, as we look to take this out of the parable and into our lives, the first thing that we need to realize is that the person that we petition is fundamentally different than this judge. That we have a judge in this story that doesn't fear God, that doesn't believe in any higher ultimate goodness, that doesn't believe in any standard of morality. But we come before a God who created that, who is the ultimate good, the absolute perfection, who believes and is justice, who is fairness and truth and goodness, who loves mankind unconditionally and has the utmost respect for his creation. The second thing we have to remember is that we cannot wear God out. We will never beat God down with our continual coming. He will never get sick of hearing from us. And so what that gives us is not a judge who will eventually give in because he's sick of us, but a God who wants to give us good things because he loves us and has compassion on us. A God who, had that widow been able to come before him, had it been God sitting in that seat of judgment before her, he would have granted her judgment and justice because of his compassion on her and his love for her. So let's think about this for a moment. We already know that this passage is calling us to come continually before God in the same way that this woman was continually coming before the judge. Now have in mind while I'm talking about this, what are some of the things that you come before God for? What are some of the things that you pray about and that you seek his will for? Just have that in the back of your mind. So we have this woman coming before this judge, and we are called to do the same with God. Now picture this. If you spent as much time in prayer and meditation and in fellowship with God, if you spent as much time falling before your Lord in his throne room, in whatever way that looks like in your life, what do you think that would do to your prayer priorities? If you spent that much time in his presence, what do you think that would do, and how do you think that would change what you pray for and what you value? You see, I've seen, I haven't spent really any time in court over major serious things, but I know a lot of people who have. And I know people, whether it's through the school, whether it's through DCF, or people in our church that have been in custody battles or trials concerning where a kid is going to end up and whether or not they will be adopted. I've seen all sorts of legal issues that are major, that are life-changing events. Now think about it. Do you know anybody who's been in something like that, who's been battling for custody of their child or battling on behalf of a child or trying to regain their property that is theirs? That kind of court battle is it's consuming. It takes up everything you do. It's constantly on your mind because something significant is at stake. You see, a parent who's going to court to gain custody of their child, especially if it's against an abusive other parent, that's not something that they forget about. There aren't days where they say, oh yeah, I forgot, I've got to do that thing for court, because it consumes them. In the same way that whatever was happening with this widow was just consuming to her, she didn't wake up in the morning and say, oh man, it's 8:50, I really got to get myself down to the courthouse. I really gotta force myself down there to talk to this judge. You see, it wasn't that kind of thing for her. She kept doing it because it mattered to her, that it was significant, that what happened was important. And so If we spent that kind of time with God, what would that do to our priorities? And so the question here isn't, should we pray a lot? Clearly the answer to that is yes, but the question is, what should that look like? What should we be praying for? And it has all to do with our focus. You see, the hardest thing about going from a place where we don't pray a lot to praying all the time is that praying all the time, an integral, crucial part of that is having things to pray about. Now, that might sound really basic, that might sound really obvious, but it's true. We cannot pray all the time, just like we cannot drive to the courthouse every day unless we have something significant to pray about. But if you're spending all of your time with yourself and with other people, if you're not spending time in prayer and in fellowship with God, then you are not going to have the priorities that enable you to pray all the time. It's interesting, I was working on this sermon kind of in my head this week as I was out hunting. And I was actually up right by Nate and Averill's house in a field below their house, and I had a blind set up, and I was sitting there on my milk crate, and I had my bow, and I was just waiting for a deer to come out. Just sitting there, and I was kind of stirring through the sermon in my head while I was keeping my eyes open. And I kept saying things like, oh God, if you could just let a deer come out in the next 10 minutes so I can shoot it and go home, that'd be great. You see, I've got stuff to do, and it could walk out in 2 hours, or it could walk out in 5 minutes, and either one would be, no major harm to the universe, but then I could be done. I could fill my tag, I could feel good, have some food to bring home. And it was really awful because I was writing this sermon at the time. And so every time I would say, oh, come on, deer, just come out. And then my immediate next thought was, God, come on, you made the deer. And he was just like, what are you doing? Look at the passage that you're studying. Now, I had my phone with me, and I had the passage open on my phone, and so I'd every 20 minutes, half an hour, I'd glance down and I'd read through, and he said, look at the passage that you're reading. He said, this is the prayer life that I want for you. He said, the prayer life that I want for you, it's not when you finally get sick of sitting in your deer stand that you ask me for a deer. I want you continually praying. I want you constantly coming into my presence. And you don't get those kind of prayer atmospheres out of these kind of prayers. That the prayers that a deer walks out, or that we don't get any traffic, those aren't the kind of prayers that lead to a rich, full, continually just praying and being enveloped by the presence of God kind of relationship with Him. And so when we live our prayer life in these minuscule little things, when that's as deep as we go, we're never going to get here. Now, I'm not saying that God doesn't care about the little things in our life. And I'm not saying that we should only bring the big things to God. I'm not talking about that. I heard somebody share a story recently about someone they knew who just, as an experiment, just prayed about everything. They prayed about what to get at McDonald's. They prayed about what kind of shampoo they could get. And it wasn't because that stuff really mattered. You're not going to go to hell for buying Suave or anything like that. It's not that those things were so significant. It was just an exercise in bringing God into the little things. And so I'm not saying that God doesn't want to be in the little things, because He does. He wants to go through the drive-thru with you. He wants to go to the grocery store with you. What I'm talking about is how deep are you going? It's amazing what perspective will do to you. We're all too quickly coming up on Emma's first birthday. And for those of you who weren't around last year, Emma was born at about 3 o'clock in the morning. At 7:30, our doctor came in to do an inspection and told us that Emma had a birth defect. She had a deformity. And there was a part of her that wasn't fully developed. And because of that, she wouldn't be able to go to the bathroom, and so she needed immediate surgery. And so we're laying there. We've gotten 2 hours of sleep. We're exhausted. Rachel just gave birth. She has a spinal headache. I'm just tired, but was convinced I was just as miserable. And we're sitting there in this wonderful little hospital room in the women's center that we had visited for months beforehand, with the staff that we had spent time with months beforehand. In this cozy atmosphere, we were the only ones there. And 12 hours after my little girl was born, she was loaded up in this giant infant ambulance and trucked off alone to Fletcher Allen, without her mother, without me. And so this day that we had planned to spend just cuddling in bed with our newborn baby and watching TV and relaxing and just enjoying her, she was having IVs shoved in her arm and tubes shoved down her nose. So we drive out to Burlington, and it was one of the worst couple hours of my life. Just it wasn't the plan. It wasn't what was supposed to happen. And my little baby that was so perfect and so beautiful was just in this room with all these wires and things attached to her. And I thought, this is the worst thing that could be happening. But you know what happened? We got there. I went and checked on Rachel. She had ridden an ambulance out, and I checked in on her, and then I said, I really want to go see my baby. And so I went down to the NICU, and they went through all the things I had to do and how to wash her hands and all this, and finally they let me go over and see her. And she had wires on her, and she had sensors all over her chest monitoring her activity. And my first reaction was just to be terrified, was to be overwhelmed by how horrific it was. But after I spent 20 minutes or half an hour by her bedside holding her hand, I finally was able to take my eyes off of her, and I started to look around. And I saw babies that were 2.5 pounds. I saw parents sitting next to incubators, reaching their hands in and with rubber gloves touching their babies because their baby had to be in a sterile environment. And all of a sudden, our situation didn't look so bad. You see, that situation that at first was just the worst thing that could possibly happen, that was so horrific and terrible, with just a little bit of perspective, all of a sudden wasn't that big a deal. And my baby needed surgery, and surgery on a baby who's a day old is never safe, it's never good, but she was breathing on her own. Her heart was pumping just fine. She was fully developed. Just a little bit of perspective. And here's what I think, church. That if we spent less time kind of over here in our own realm where we occasionally jut out, we occasionally pop in on God to throw a request at Him, if we spend less time over here where the biggest issue we have is that a deer isn't walking into a field fast enough, where we're not able to save up enough money for a new toy soon enough, where our relationships aren't perfect enough, if we spend less time here and more time in the throne room of God, you know what we're going to begin to see? And you know what we're going to begin to get? We're going to begin to see other people in other situations, and we will receive perspective on our lives. We will begin to realize that our financial problems, no matter how big they are not as big as some other people have. We will begin to realize that our heartache is not always bigger than everybody else's, or at least that we're not alone. Even if you have the biggest financial hardships, even if you have the biggest, deepest heartache, you are not the only person there. You are not the only person who's been hurt. You are not the only person who's been abused. And we will realize exactly what it is that we need. I find it interesting that this passage talks about justice. The Greek word used here can often be translated as vengeance, which sounds a lot more aggressive. And I began to think about that. And if God is going to be bringing us vengeance, what will that look like? And I thought about who God is, especially God in the New Testament. And the God that we see in the Bible, and especially in the New Testament, is the God who does not bring about vengeance on people. You see, the God of the New Testament is forgiving and loving, and he works in people's lives, and he sometimes just allows or puts people in positions of hardship and pain, but he always does that to draw them to him. That he might pull his blessing off of someone so that they realize how much they need him. But he never just attacks somebody. You see, when Jesus was on the cross, when those soldiers were mocking him and torturing him and hurting him, God didn't come down and kill those guys. He didn't come down and extract vengeance from them in just punishing them to get back at them for what they did to Christ. That's not the God that we see. And so I was thinking about it. I said, well, if the God of the New Testament does not pour out vengeance on people, then what is this talking about? And the only remaining thing that God will and does pour out his vengeance on is evil and sin in the world. The only thing that he doesn't hold back against, that he just annihilates and attacks and goes after, is sin and evil in our lives. And so this passage isn't about, hey, look, this guy was a jerk to you at school, and so if you pray enough, God will make him fail chemistry. That's not what it's talking. This isn't just getting back at people on our behalf. What Jesus is saying is, look, if you come to a place where you are just so involved in me and in what my Father is doing, if you were spending this much time with God in prayer, seeking him, he will not hold back for a moment to seek vengeance and justice on the evil in your life. That the God who sent his Son to die for us, when we seek him, when we say, God, there is so much in my life that is attacking me, when you say, Lord, Satan is just having a field day in my life, and he's birthing this anger in me, which hurts me, it hurts my kids, it hurts my friends. You say, God, Satan is just birthing this insecurity in me where I don't believe in myself. I don't know how to look at myself. He's convincing me that I'm worthless. That is the attack on us. And God says, look, I want you to come to me with that. I want you to come to me every single day as if you were trying to just wear me down with your coming. And I will give you justice. I will eradicate that from your life. And where Satan has stolen your identity, I will give you a new one. When he has stolen your self-esteem, I will give it back to you. And everything that he has taken from you, I will return. That's what a relationship with God looks like. It starts in the big stuff, where he just comes into our lives and everything that's been taken. Because from the moment you were born, Satan has been stealing things from you. That is what he does. That is, at the heart of sin, an incredibly adequate way to look at it. Satan steals things from us. Satan looks at a young girl, and he says, in elementary school, I'm going to steal your image. I'm going to get people to make fun of you and pick on you so you don't think you have any value, and I'm going to steal your sense of value. And then you're going to get to high school, and you're going to meet this boy, and I've already stolen all kinds of things from him. And because I've already stolen your value, you are going to try and use him to get it back. And when you do that, I'm going to steal your innocence. He says you're going to continue in your life, and you're not going to have your value. You're not going to have your innocence. You're not going to have that image of who you are. And eventually, I will steal your hope that you will ever have value, that you will ever belong, and I will steal your hope that you will ever be loved and cared for. See, that's what this passage is about. This is about God saying, look, Satan wants to steal everything from you, but if you come to me, if you just live in my presence, if you just set up a tent in the middle of my courtroom and come to me day in and day out, I will not hesitate. I will not wait. I will give that back to you. I will always rule in your favor, and I will always restore to you what he has taken away. The enemy wants to steal. God will not hesitate to give back to you what you have lost. In even greater measure than you ever remember or could imagine. See, that's what we're talking about here. This isn't, if you pray enough, you're going to get that nice car, or you're going to get that nice house. It's so much better than that. Because the reason that you need that car so much, the reason you need that house so much, is because you are trying to fill a hole that was left when Satan stole something from you. And you think that if you can get that house, if you can get that car, if you can get that job, that will fix the problem. And God says, look, I'm not going to give you the house. Maybe I will, but not because you asked. I'm not going to give you the car right now. I'm not going to give you the social status or the friends or the boyfriend or the girlfriend. I'm not going to give that to you because that's not what you need. Instead, I'm going to go back a step further and I am going to fill the hole. I am going to heal your soul so you no longer feel like you have to have those things to have any value. Now, God does give us nice things. I'm not saying that He doesn't. But He wants to fix the hole first. And God might want to give you a nice car, but He wants to heal your heart first. He wants to give you that car so you can feel safe, so you can enjoy it. He wants us to have good things. But He doesn't want to give it to us to fill the hole that only He can fill. And I would even go as far as to say, sometimes God has to withhold blessings from us because we are only trying to use them to fill a hole that He can fill. That sometimes we hold God back from bringing blessings into our lives because we're not seeking Him to fix us. We're seeking the thing to fix us and seeking Him to give it to us. But would you let God come into your heart? Would you let Him fix what's been broken in you? Would you let Him restore what's been taken from you? That's what it means to live in Him. And would you realize, to the point where you seek this as ferociously as this widow seeks justice, would you realize how much you need it? Realize that all of the insecurities and the unsatisfiable desires in your life, that where a thing just takes so much priority and focus, that I don't need to drive a nice car. I don't need to go get a deer to prove that I'm a competent person. That I let God do that for me. And so if I drive a nice car, if God blesses me with something great, I don't just grab hold of that blessing as, oh, this means that I'm an okay person. But we see it for what it is, just a gift. Not a gift to make us happy. Not a gift to satisfy any urge or craving, but just something because He loves us, because He's already filled the holes, He's already repaid the debts, and He's already restored what was lost. Would you do that? We're going to close in prayer for just a couple minutes. Would you seek Jesus like that? Would you allow Him to create a desire in your life to be made whole by His love that just brings you constantly in His presence? No prayer alarms, no schedules. Just this deep desire for justice from Him.